Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jan Morrison from TIES. Welcome. This afternoon, it's both gratifying and comforting that you are all on this afternoon with us in these very troubling times. This is an opportunity for our amazing community of practice to come together in the way community of practices can and the way we have shown in past. This mobilization of information and opportunity is something that we at TIES and you in the field as ecosystems and a single community of practice have demonstrated for the last 6 years. We know that it's important for all of us to consider the situations that we have on the ground locally, to work together and to be able to solve and bring to resolution problems that are locally driven, but are of national and of human importance. Today, we have a lot of discussion that'll be an opportunity for you to be a part of. But I also want to say that this is an invitation for your thoughts, for your consideration, and for your community. So don't let the conversation end at this afternoon. Please think about how you will turn it to your ecosystems and to all who are part of your community at large, and consider this situation at hand, because today we're going to talk about connectivity in the age of COVID-19. That all said, we're having connectivity problems all week. So there are dogs and children in our midst, and we understand that there will be noise, and we welcome all of you. Please don't leave just because of that. So let me now introduce Mark Siciliano, my business partner at TIES, as you well know, and Mark will take it from here.
Thanks, Jan. Really glad to be with all of you today. I think Jan said it well in talking about the importance of the community of practice and what we're doing on our end to try to curate resources, reach out and request information from all of you so that we can amplify that, in addition to connecting with other experts and thought leaders in the field to continue to bring timely and important information, messages of support and opportunity to all of you. We know that you're also being bombarded with information from all of your networks, organizations, and affiliations that are also thinking about what to do in terms of resource sharing in this virtual time. But we wanted today to take this as an opportunity to actually pause, because we know the best of intentions that are out there surrounding all of this and making sure that resources are shared. But we also recognize that the inequity that exists during regular days is really exacerbated in times like this. And so we know that the digital divide is real. And we know that when we are using virtual means to connect communities, those that are unable to participate regularly don't have access today. And so this is an opportunity for us and for you together to think through some of these challenges. We know you're addressing it on your own in your own communities, and we wanted to use this opportunity to pause, to think about the importance of inclusion, and to think about those whose voices are not present, who are not included in supporting this work, and to see what can be done, knowing that there are several weeks that together we're going to have to experience, not just as a nation, but as a world. And that's far too long for people to be removed or forgotten as part of this conversation. And so I'll turn it over to some of my colleagues to continue to frame this and think about the specifics associated and the goals associated with our time together today. But just wanted to highlight the importance of pausing and recognizing that this is the time to think about inclusion. I'll turn it over to Veronica Gonzalez to continue.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Jan. Hello, everyone. It's really great to connect with you in some way, shape, or form on webinars. It's really sort of a difficult time, I think, for all of us. And so from, the TIES family, from my apartment in New York, from all of us, I think we're just, I think first starting out, hoping that you all are safe and healthy, and really staying sane in this period of time. I think echoing some of the things that Mark mentioned, the goal of today's conversation is a little twofold, right? We really want to take the time to hear from all of you and be present in the moment and understanding what is happening in your communities at this point, what's happening in terms of connectivity, who's not connected, who's at the table, who's not. I know devices are also issues, and just some other things in relation to technology and just overall broadband connectivity, both challenges and perhaps even strengths that you all are dealing with. I think the second opportunity for us as well is to think through this as a community of practice in a really supportive environment, to seize this challenge that we have right now as an opportunity for really us to improve what inclusivity and access looks like within our communities. How do we improve broadband across broad spectrums of whether it's rural communities or just certain areas of cities that don't have as much connection? How do we use this opportunity to improve our relationships, not just maybe with one school district, but maybe creating multiple different relationships in the true ecosystem fashion across different stakeholder groups, for all of us to really seize this moment and think about how as ecosystems we can do that, and really think through what the system looks like for our communities moving forward. So I will be introducing a few colleagues in just a moment, but we're going to have some discussions with all of you around understanding the magnitude of connectivity and technology problems, also what needs to happen in this conversation, any ideas that you have for making it happen, and really having some open discussions around that. I will also note that we sent out a survey that several of you participated in, and we appreciate that. We still want to continue to hear from you, both in this discussion here now, as well as when we conclude our webinar. So as we move along, please add your voice to the chat box. We're hoping that we'll be able to unmute a few of you so that we can hear from you directly. I think in this time it's important for us to hear each other's voices as well. And then would like to probably conclude with some real calls to action on how we may be able to design some sort of an advocacy effort to improve broadband and access in our communities. So, Angie has the slide up here of really what we know already. So the Federal Communications Commission knows that there are at least 12 million students in the country who fall into this homework gap because they do not have regular broadband access needed to do their nightly schoolwork. It is the cruelest part of the digital divide that all of us are working effortlessly, I'm sure, to address. But in this time, it's even more exacerbated, right? And so those kids that maybe had connections in the school day are now at home and are perhaps completely isolated with their families. And so how are we making sure that that digital divide does not continue to exacerbate those gaps in learning with our most vulnerable communities? In addition to that, if we can go to the next slide, we also know a few facts that we have from last year's Census Bureau and from Common Sense Media that of teachers that were surveyed, this is 12% of teacher surveys. I'm sure we know that those percentages probably increase in certain areas, that a majority of their students do not have access to internet or a device when they're home, computer, that 4 out of 10 teachers say that many of their students don't have adequate home access to internet or computers to do their schoolwork, and that teachers that are teaching in our most vulnerable schools, Title I schools that have predominantly a big population, predominantly children of color, low income, et cetera, that at least over 60% of their students don't have home access to the internet or the computer. So again, these are discrepancies and things that we know already exist. And in this time of a pandemic where we're all housebound, what is happening to the students and the families that don't have that regular connection and access both to broadband as well as devices in the home? As I mentioned, we sent out a survey to all of you. We just took a few quotes from those that we think are important to share and start our discussion. So our ecosystem in central Pennsylvania mentioned that families, even when they have technology, it's often that they need to share it with other family members. It's a big issue facing our students, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing that now, especially if you have students of different age ranges that might have different needs for access. If parents or family members are working from home, that's a lot of internet and a lot of device connections that we are expecting families to have, and that's just not the reality. Our Great Lakes Bay region partners mentioned that there's a lot of connectivity and speed challenges within the 8 counties that are served. A majority of those connections are substandard, but that's only a portion of the problem there. But there are districts that very few of them that have one-to-one device initiatives so that students who don't have devices at home may not continue to have access to computers. There's also a lot of high poverty areas there that are well over 60% that also to continue to show the vulnerable populations in terms of low income and access to broadband and devices. If we can move to the next slide as well, in Massachusetts, our ecosystem, Metro West, mentioned that some school districts, many of their families don't have access to wide-speed internet or computers. And if they do have devices at home, it's either a phone or they may have multiple needs again. And then in Arizona, we did hear that there are a lot of tribal and rural and other underserved communities that do not have fast and reliable and affordable broadband internet connections, which again continues to make it an even bigger challenge during this period of time of how do you make sure that learning gap does not continue to increase. And one other thing that I'll mention on here that was mentioned in the surveys, but we don't have it in the slides, is that college students, we had a university representative fill out the survey and mention also that college students, we can't forget them as part of vulnerable populations of our, our learning population, in that they may also not have access to Wi-Fi and computers, and so how are they expected to keep up as well? So the next slide here is really just a resource that we'll send out these slides to make sure that you have the link there, but it does by state, by area. You can look at what broadband looks like in your state and in your area. And as we continue these conversations, we're hoping that this will be a resource for you to provide to community members to potentially work on increasing access to broadband and really advocate for that, as well as just be knowledgeable of perhaps your most vulnerable populations within your ecosystems as well. So with that, we really sort of want to open up the conversation and hear from all of you and what you're experiencing, your thoughts, challenges, perhaps some successes or things that you're working on to improve this, not just for this COVID-19 time, but also thinking forward as ecosystems, how we can improve this for our most vulnerable populations. And really, I'm excited to announce or to invite my colleagues, Julie Hayesfield, Daniel Aguirre, Lakeisha Harding, to join the conversation and facilitate a dialogue between all of you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time. I know how busy you all must be trying to navigate your teams from a virtual environment. It's a totally different world, and this conversation is probably very real for all of us right now, experiencing working digitally, right? So we wanted to take this opportunity to try to have a more complete conversation. The digital divide, of course, as we keep mentioning, is very, very present right now. But it's also an entry point into a much larger conversation about who's being reached with the content we're all hoping to share and currently sharing. And it's great that there's so much content out there, but we want to have a conversation about who can't access that content, who's not being reached, who's not being represented, and how can we bring them into the conversation, and how can they be considered? And what is missing from this conversation now? Broadband is certainly one part of it, but what happens when broadband is not a problem, and it's homeschooling and language barriers, and again, just having a more complete conversation about all of the realities that should be discussed. So I'd like to turn it over to Julie Hashbeard to give us a little bit of some of her experience in navigating this type of scenario as well.
Sure, thanks, Daniel. So I guess the main thing I wanted to point out is just that as we're thinking about this, we really need to make sure that we're involving the families and school districts who are impacted by this, making sure that what we're offering, what we're advocating for, is actually meeting the needs of the community that we're serving. So my experience is that I worked at an urban school district in Nashville with Lakeisha, and we had it was high poverty, and we became a one-to-one school. And this was about 6 years ago when that was kind of a new thing. And it was really easy for us at the administration level to just think about, well, we just need to get computers to kids, just get computers in kids' hands. We understood we needed to deal with the connectivity issues as well. But when we brought in the community that we were serving, the parents and the students, we learned that there were a lot of other issues that we hadn't thought about. So some of the parents were concerned about the safety of their kids walking to and from school carrying an expensive laptop in their backpack in the neighborhoods where they lived. Some of the students were concerned that even if they took their laptop home, that as we're hearing from some of the ecosystems in the form they filled out, that the computers were being used by other family members and not necessarily for the academic learning of the student. And so bringing in the community and making sure to hear their voices and concerns was really important. The decision we made at that school to keep the laptops in school. Now, that's not an option here in this situation, but I just bring it up to make sure that we're considering all of those other unintended consequences that may happen as we're talking about connectivity and devices in kids' hands. And I wanted to have Lakeisha talk next. She's been really involved in the online community of teachers who are now having to navigate teaching virtually these days. And I'd like her to share some thoughts on what she's seen on the online platforms.
Thank you, Julie, and hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to read actually a post that I've seen floating around that I've seen probably 15 different teachers share. It just keeps coming up, and I think it's powerful and kind of speaks to how they feel. And I want to also keep in mind that sometimes when we hear feedback, we might not like necessarily what we hear, but we need to hear it so that we can heal, move forward, and offer solutions. So this was been floating around again. It says, we gave educators almost no notice. We asked them to completely redesign what school looks like, and in about 24 hours, local administrators and teachers Apollo 13 the problem and fixed it. Kids learning, children being fed, needs being met in the midst of a global crisis. No state agency did this. No so-called national expert on curriculum did this. The local educators fixed it in hours. So, I read that because I think it's important for us to know how teachers feel about our involvement as STEM leaders. And if we are really going to make sure that we're focusing on them, the learning experiences of their kids, I want us to really think about the solutions and how we are being viewed as this. If we're going to be leaders in this movement, especially in the move to, virtual education, access, as Daniel said, is one element. That is one element. Broadband, device device, but there are other, be that cultural elements, be that collaboration and communication between schools and families. There's so many layers to this, but we have to keep these kids and these teachers first. I would hate for teachers, and I have felt like this in the past, when you feel like you're the one tasked to solve the problem, but maybe not acknowledged for it. Imagine that pressure that teachers are feeling right now, and how they are feeling the next couple of months are going to look. Some things I've seen on social media that they've done to make the situation better, more lighthearted. I've seen tons of resource sharing of both virtual resources, things they've created on their own, websites that they have found useful, webinars that they have found useful. I have seen neighborhoods do drive-throughs to show their faces for the kids that they know don't have internet access. I've seen teachers offer their own virtual classrooms, not only to their students, that is their primary demographic, but they've offered it and opened it up to other students outside of their schools. I've seen mobile libraries driving around. I've seen school districts using the bus routes they already have to create food delivery systems, all of this stuff. And they did it again, like the meme said, in less than 24 hours to push out a plan. So it is possible. And as we have all of you here today, I am hoping that we can use the voices of these teachers and the students who are already doing the work to put out even more ideas. And just know that here at TIES, we've put everything aside to focus on this and making sure that these kids in this time are provided for. And so any suggestions, opinions, anything that we can do to be of more support, we definitely want to be there for all communities and are open to making this stronger in any way that we can. So thank you so much, and I'm going to give it back to Daniel.
Thank you. Well said, Lakeisha. Thank you for that. It's really important to take all of those things that form the greater conversation and to look inward at what we're doing, and then pick up our heads and see who else we're having this conversation with and who's missing from the table. I'd like to start this conversation off by asking the question of what needs to happen and what is missing from the conversation. What ideas do you have for making it happen? But let's start off with what needs to happen. What are those non-negotiable things that need to happen? And while you're thinking about that and raising your hand in the comment area, let's be mindful of how many people are on this conversation and should be part of this conversation that are online with us today, and be mindful of taking our thought and being prepared to share it concisely so that we can share this space with everyone, and share this time, and so that everyone has an opportunity to ask questions and to push each other and to answer as well and offer ideas and solutions.
Great. So we have a few comments and questions that have come in. I'm going to start with John Chadwick and unmute him, if that's okay with our facilitators.
Absolutely, yeah.
So John, you're unmuted. We'd love to hear a little bit more from you. We can hear you.
Thank you. This is John Chadwick. I'm the state E-rate coordinator in New Mexico. And I've been working with, a lot of providers, over the last week, collecting information about, what they're doing to help schools and libraries in this time. And I heard from the Navajo Nation. And what I heard from them is that they're having a lot of issues trying to find mobile hotspots. I mean, a lot of pressure from, parents and, at home with their kids. And their one telecom company that might have some has been very unresponsive. And so they asked me to find leads and see if anybody has some extra mobile hotspots that they can, loan out, to the Navajo Nation that can go out to families in some very remote areas of both New Mexico and Arizona.
Talk about vulnerable populations, right? There is a community who is navigating the realities of being marginalized actively, and what a challenge that they're facing, like many communities. Is there anyone that has any answer to this? Any suggestions, ideas, connections? So these are things that we can also keep in mind, and as we come across opportunities and resources, we have an understanding of what each other's needs are, and we can capture those and have an opportunity to share those with intention and as a response to those that are serving those communities actively.
Right. I actually think that Kathleen, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you very much. I've been in daily contact with the Department of Dene Education and their IT person out there. So anything that you can learn, please share with me, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people.
We have a couple folks that are John, that are responding. So I just unmuted our colleague Kathleen Schofield there in Northeast Florida. We'd love to have you share what you put in the chat, and then Casey, I'm going to unmute you next in Arizona, if that's helpful.
Hi, Veronica. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. We started, it came as kind of a shock to us, really, how great the need was for kids to have access to a computer. And even before this happened, we just viewed it as it is just simply not fair that our most at-risk children can't do their homework, can't do extensions at home, can't access school resources. And so we started to attack that problem. We have our businesses donate their end-of-life computers, and they work it out in a way that normally, to do responsible recycling, it ends up costing them money, or in some cases they can get a rebate, all depending on what their situation is. So working with some of our partners who have environmentally sound computer end-of-life recycling, instead of the computer getting put into that system and they either end up owing a little money or getting a little money back, they forfeit any money that they would get back, and instead the computers are refreshed, refurbished, and updated with whatever the images that's needed for a particular school district. So we image them so that the kids get this computer and then have access to all those things. And we typically, then we pay for the refurbishment. So I raise funds for that, and we've got about 1,000 computers distributed so far. And how we decide who gets the computers is, of course, based on need, but we either work directly with a school and try to impact across a range of a program. Like, for instance, we have one of our high schools where we've got cybersecurity pathway, other computer science pathways, and a girls in IT group. So we worked directly with them because we knew that the computer was going to be used the way it was intended, because there's a teacher or a program wrapped around it, so that, because sometimes in some of these areas, the parents might rather take them for use at the home or sell them because of a need for food or, sadly, other things. So we either work directly with a school with a program that will support the continued use, or with an out-of-school provider like the Jack's Pal or the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So we empower, again, an adult connection to make sure that the computers are getting used for our intended purposes. When the businesses donate the computers to us for this program, sometimes they will have some organizations that they work with and they'd like us to consider working with, and other times they just allow us to put them where the greatest need is. And someone earlier had mentioned working closely with the school districts, and that is so important because one lesson I learned early on was that in some of our districts, if we gave that computer directly to the child because they're a minor, there were some potential legal implications for the school district if we use their facility to give it to the child. So it made us really do a look from a liability standpoint. Now, I'll also mention accessibility to the internet. We haven't tackled that yet, and I'm so happy about people who are sharing what they're doing. One of the reasons that we haven't tackled it yet is because we had looked at some hotspots, but we found that with the open access that we were going to be held liable if a child did something bad through the internet because we gave them access. And I know it kind of seems counterproductive, but anybody who's got suggestions on how you're working around potential liability if you distribute hotspots, that would be something I'd be really interested to learn.
Look into.
And thank you so much for giving me the chance to share that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Kathleen. And we really appreciate, especially all the considerations for, liabilities and things like that. But we really appreciate it. We're getting a lot of comments, so I want to keep us moving if that's okay. Casey, I unmuted you. You had a couple resources to maybe share.
So, hi, yeah. I know that there's been a few internet providers in Arizona that have started stepping up with either discounts or like free internet for students. I'm kind of looking into it right now because I'm not sure exactly what the coverage looks like in the Navajo Nation, but I found a couple resources. Maybe I can swap emails with our colleague in New Mexico and share some of these when I find more concrete resources.
Great. And thank you so much for that. We're getting quite a bit of resources that are being posted within the chat. And so we will make sure to continue that conversation and posting those resources. Rachel, perhaps I'll send those to you or add those to the Google Doc. I'm wondering for our facilitators if it's okay if I unmute our friend Jacqueline.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep this conversation going.
Okay. Jacqueline, are you here? I think she wanted to turn her video on. So while we're trying to work that out, I just wanted to, she's connected. So perhaps I'll just read what she was mentioning. But there's a company called Locket, L-O-K-K-E-T, that sets up free Wi-Fi in low-income communities. She's pretty sure that they're overworked currently, but it would still be worth it for high-need areas to reach out. They look for schools to set up signals for families to access within a certain radius. And their website is www.lokket.com. So Jacqueline, if you're able to come to us, we'd love to hear more about that or anything else that you know about there.
Can you hear me?
I don't know if our facility. Yes. Hey.
Okay. Hi. Sorry about that. So I actually learned about Locket with Daniel. Hi. In San Isidro. and they set up free Wi-Fi. They look for school sites to do the setup. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my computer, but they look for school sites to do the setup because they need a little bit of elevation, and they can have a signal that goes, I can't remember if it's 1 mile or a few miles from the site, but then families can access that Wi-Fi signal for free.
And that connection requires local community partners who are willing to sort of host that equipment setup. And so there's dialogue that needs to happen around that. And I think that they are working on building a national team, if I'm not mistaken, Jacqueline. Do you remember?
They are national, yeah. So they're actually international. I think they're from Australia originally.
That's right. They're from Australia.
And, yeah, so the San Diego website is freewifisandiego.com, but the one that I sent you is their their official website. So if any partners are willing to host a site, especially if they are finding that their students are struggling, I think it would, at the very least, it wouldn't hurt to reach out. And what they do is, like someone mentioned how the companies work, but they took their marketing budget and they turned it into putting it right back into the community, because they found that was much more valuable than what they were doing with marketing.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really awesome resource, and could be a possible solution for some of the things that have been brought up already. So I'd like to switch the conversation a little bit and just think about what are the things that are missing from this conversation? Who are the people that are not being reached right now? And what are some things that people are doing to try to connect with these audiences? It could be people who are navigating or experiencing financial hardship, just marginalized communities, these communities that we know are not often considered, or the last ones to get resources, or don't know how to access the resources.
While we wait for those answers or comments to come in for that question, Daniel, I'm wondering if I can unmute Amanda Smith, who has an interesting suggestion or conversation starter she'd like to ask.
Yes, let's hear.
You're not looking.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Veronica, for me, it cut out right when you said the name, so if you can repeat the name, that would be helpful. I don't know if it cut out for
Amanda. Yeah, Amanda Smith, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Amanda.
So sorry, I didn't know if I was unmuted. I was just more thinking, at least long term, through the end of the school year, even into next school year, are we looking at talking to the U.S. Department of Education, all internet providers, and our STEM funders network on a larger level to really address the broadband access across the United States and how we can get that accomplished and started at that kind of level? I'm just thinking we have so many inequities to solve, but are the STEM funders network specifically saying this is where we should really start possibly shifting our priority for right now?
So I think that's a really excellent question, and I think it's an excellent suggestion. One of the things that we did hope would happen today, that we think through some solutions that are longer term, and solving some of the issues that are not just facing us in the space of COVID-19, but how do we really think through what this looks like for a long-term strategy so that equity and access do not continue to be an issue, at least in certain spaces. So I know we've been talking a lot about broadband and device connections, and we know that there are so many other things included in that as well in terms of equity and access But I would say, yes, I think those conversations are absolutely necessary. And we'd love to hear from all of you who would be interested in having some of those conversations or furthering that dialogue.
Hi, this is
Yes,
Jeremy. I'd also like to mention really quickly in response to this that we are right now talking with Jake Steele, who's the Deputy Director of the Office of Ed Tech. And he has to kind of run it up the flagpole in order to be interviewed from his comms team. However, they have a bunch of resources that are currently available, and he's also hoping to talk with us about what the Department of Ed's plans are to address things like the broadening digital divide under this particular scenario. So some of those conversations are already happening, and we're hoping to have some recorded interviews available for all of you soon over the next several days to a week.
And there are certainly so many things that are very much out of our reach right now, or just being brought into the conversation. For example, the internet as a utility is being discussed. But those are all things that we can bring to the conversation and bring our communities into the conversation for. And I think more than ever, this pandemic is shedding a light on the importance of why the internet is a utility and not like a luxury, as it currently seems to be.
Yeah. So I think I want to unmute our colleague Joanne Coggin really quick, just who has some significant experience with Indigenous communities. And then after that, Jacqueline has some interesting information about teacher chats. So maybe we'll pivot there if that's okay with our facilitators.
Absolutely.
Hi, yeah, so this is Joanne. So we have been trying to put some thought into how to reach out to our Indigenous communities. So accessing or learning via kind of virtual digital resources is not kind of conducive to their ways of knowing and learning. So we're trying to find ways to reach them in non-digital virtual ways. So, I mean, what makes most sense is sending them some stuff in the mail, but like many ecosystems, we have no budget. And there are a lot of communities that need to be reached, and British Columbia is very, very large. So I was wondering if anybody has figured out ways to reach remote and rural communities in non-digital ways, and if they've been sending out things, what have they been sending out, and how have they been sending that out?
Joanne, that's a great question, and I think it's difficult we're a little delayed in terms of the questions that are being thrown out and getting responses. So thank you for throwing that out. And then I think what we'll see is some people answering that, and then we'll come back to that question if that's okay with you. In the meantime, I forgot who I was going to unmute next, but Jacqueline was going to talk to us about.
Yeah, we're going to talk to Jacqueline about some resources, and then I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit.
Yes, and then our friend Kim Ga has several resources that she'd like to share as well, if that's okay.
Oh, lovely, yes.
Jacqueline,
sharing is
okay,
caring.
and Jacqueline, you should be unmuted, so if you want to talk about the teacher chat.
Me?
So that was Jacqueline.
Is that Jacqueline?
Oh, hi, yes, I'm sorry. So I participated in a Twitter chat last Wednesday or Thursday, NGSS chat. So that's the Next Generation Science Standards, if you're not familiar. And a lot of people are obviously panicking. And I proposed an idea to create resource or at-home investigations that are family friendly. So not just reaching your students that are your own grade, but maybe aligning it to standards across different grade bands. And it got a really great response. So I'm going to start doing live stream family friendly investigations and aligned to the NGSS standards from kindergarten up through 12th grade, and then including making it parent friendly as well, because this, I mean, trying to recreate the wheel with every classroom and every teacher across this country is just not going to get us where we need to go in time. So once I have links to sign up for the free live stream, I will send that to you.
Lovely. And then Veronica, you were going to unmute Kim, I believe you said. Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, so Kim, you should be unmuted, and we'd love to hear a little bit about the resources you posted. And then after that, John, I'm going to call you John D. You have a question that we'd love to unmute you and hear from you about.
Hi, thank you. Yes, it's Kim Goff, and it follows up with what Jacqueline was just talking about with family-friendly resources. And maybe it could also apply to Joanne's question about reaching Indigenous communities or communities that are farther away. This is from a listserv, so this isn't me personally. This is posted by Tracy Manning, Curator of Education. She's at the Mahoning Valley Historical Society. And she posted that they put together STEM sacks and history kits. So these are large envelopes or paper sacks, and they have instructions, information, and supply lists inside. And they're trying to think about what families can do at home with items found around the house. Each kit has a label on it, and can be picked up. They're doing a pickup from their front desk, even though the museum is closed. They have a staff member during specific hours who facilitates the pickup, and they're keeping the interaction very minimal. But she said in just 2 days, they had more than 200 kits picked up. So it sounds like this is just some paper and printing with ideas and activity plans people can do on their own. And I'm wondering if for something like a band office, if you could send information like this to a band office for them to print so residents could pick it up. And again, thinking about items they might have at home they can use to do these activities. I thought that sounded pretty great and definitely low tech.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. And John, I'm going to unmute you so you can answer your question. We are getting short on time. I think we do want to encourage the conversation and the resources to continue. And we will share sort of a follow-up with this recording and the notes that are being taken right now that all of you can see, and let you know how you can stay in the loop and ask questions and give resources. So John, do you want to throw out the question that you had? Unfortunately, we probably won't get to answering it today, but I at least want to give you a chance.
Yeah, one of the issues or questions that I was talking about or asking about had to do with, one, there's various state agencies that work in remote areas. I think that we could leverage some of their successes in terms of accessing the internet through the technologies that they have been applying.
Great. And was there another question that you might have had around special education students?
Yeah, I had also asked a question specifically dealing with how are we organizationally going to address special education students' needs.
Great.
I've seen many courses that address various components of STEM and the like, but I haven't seen anything addressing how are we going to make use of distance learning and use that concept in terms of special needs students. So for example, a simple thing like dyslexia, and how are we going to address students with dyslexia in the new world that we live in.
Great. Thank you so much, John. We, like I mentioned, we'll continue the conversation and let everybody know how they can participate and offer resources. I do, before we sort of close, Joanne, your question that you raised, Kristen Lewis Warner, I believe from Pear, had a quick resource for you. So I'm going to mute you, Kristen, for just 2 minutes if you want to share with Joanne your solution, and then perhaps we talk about sort of the closing, if that's okay with everybody.
Absolutely. Can you hear me clearly, Veronica?
We can. Hi, Kristen.
I hope everybody's doing well. I just wanted to share, I was at a virtual convening last week for the STEM Hub, and there was a lot of discussion happening around reaching all students, and obviously students who are not able to have internet access and virtual access to materials. And the very simple conversation came up about hard copy materials and working with kind of essential locations. So working with grocery stores, working with other locations where people will be kind of regularly going through as families or as a family member. I know here in Massachusetts, our governor just kind of shut down all non-essential locations. So really working with those key, I think, hardware stores, grocery stores, locations, if people have it in the budget to have hard copy materials or even flyers around where access to materials could be, might be one kind of on the ground grassroots method to reach people.
Great, thank you. I don't know if my colleagues, as I pass the deck back to Angie to show us the final slides, if Julie, Keisha, Daniel, if you have anything that you want to add in closing, or Jeremy, Mark.
I'd like to just chime in really quick and say I really appreciate everybody's consideration and thinking through how we're going to make STEM accessible in this time. And I think it's important to remember that the entry point isn't always going to be STEM, and the conversation isn't always going to start with STEM. It's got to start with creating a space where people feel comfortable enough to share with you what their needs and aspirations might be. And creating that space in this environment is a bit of a challenge, but not impossible when we're inviting the conversation to happen and reaching out to them in the means that they're able to communicate. So if that means it's a phone conversation, you know, however that might look, if it's over text, like being diverse with the way that we try to connect with each other is going to be really important, the platforms that we're using. Keisha, I don't know if you had any final thoughts. Julie, I don't know if you had any final thoughts.
This is Julie. I just wanted to remind everybody that along the lines of our teacher was talking about NGSS and tools, we are leading a webinar series on very similar to what she was doing. Starting on Thursdays, we're going to be having some live presentations on STEM activities for families and students. And again, we are trying to be very intentional about connecting that to NGSS standards to make sure that it's all aligned and it's not just one-offs and random acts of STEM. I think the more we can do that sort of thing, the better. And you could go to the STEM Ecosystems website to find out more about those.
Great. Thank you. Keisha, did you have anything to add before we wrap up and do publicize the next upcoming webinar?
Yeah, just my suggestion for everybody on the call would be to honestly just a quick sit down for 5 or 10 minutes with yourself and start writing a list of the people that you have actually talked to and who is missing from the conversation, and then begin to reach out. All we can do right now is kind of start the movement and start to get as many people involved as possible. And I definitely want to hear teachers' voices. I want teachers to feel supported. I want their kids to feel supported. And so thank you for sharing everything about, you know, all the resources today. Let's just keep these kids and teachers at the center of what we're doing.
Great, thank you. And so if we can move to the next slide, for all of you, we are going to send a follow-up to this webinar, the recording will be made available. The notes that you saw being taken as we were having the conversation will all be made available. We will also be sending out information to let you know how you can stay involved in the conversation. And as we think through pulling together some type of an advocacy effort, as mentioned by a few of you, whether it's talking to the Department of Education or, thinking through how we can perhaps even build a coalition of businesses to get more devices and connectivity there. We will let you know how we'll follow up very shortly on ways that you can get involved. In addition to that, we are, as part of this STEM at Home series, trying to continue conversations as we're all sort of in isolation so that we can support one another, but also to use this as an opportunity to learn and really, adjust some of the things that have not been working for us. So tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, we will have a conversation with a few superintendents across the country, learning from them about some of the challenges and then some of the things that are working for them in supporting families in their ecosystems. And then, as Julie mentioned, on Thursday, if we can go, on Thursday, we will start a STEM at Home series. Last Thursday, some of you may have joined when we talked with the founder of Bedtime Math and learned about some math activities that you could do at home, even without screen time and limited resources in the house to keep math conversations going. We will start, we will continue the series, as Julie mentioned, that'll be NGSS aligned and really thoughtful in the way that we are offering activities and things for families to do at home. So you can join us on Thursday at 1 p.m. as well. Feel free to share both of these webinars far and wide within your community. They're free and open to everybody. We want to make sure that people feel really supported and connected at this time. And then the last thing that I will mention is for the ecosystem leaders, Caliper, I know that this is maybe the not top of mind right now, but we do really want to continue to gather information for Caliper so that we can get a hold on Measure STEM and that we have great measurement data, evaluation data that's coming out of communities. And so a message was sent or will be sent today. We just want to encourage you and other partners to please continue to fill that out. With that, I think we just appreciate everybody being on the webinar, everybody offering so many wonderful suggestions and support for one another. We really would like to continue the conversation. Some of the comments that are continuing to come in, we would love to engage with you. So I see people want to do a STEM at Home spotlight, which we're open to doing. We know a lot of other partners are doing webinars. We don't need to own them. How do we work smarter, not harder? It sounds like there's some more online resources that are coming up. So if you can just continue to share those with us via email. We have a few forms on the site where you can add those things, and continuing the conversations would be really, really helpful to hear from all of you so that we can do this together as a true community of practice. So with that, unless anybody has anything to add, just wishing you all very healthy, safe, and same thoughts as we get through this period of isolation together.
And Veronica, in the spirit of levity, I hope everyone's office plants were watered, and also the pets were fed, office pets.
Or that you took them home. I know a few colleagues that have their office plants at home now, so hopefully.
I've heard traumatic tales, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.